I think it's age appropriate. Hello, Gabriel Souza. Hello, Sophia. Hello, Mateus. Your comments. Good work. Hello, Henry. Henry, I liked your work. I will just tell you one thing. You have to write one paragraph for each document. So your paragraph was beautiful, but you put all three documents in the one paragraph, which for me is nicer than how they want you to do it, because you showed some good transition. But you have to follow the Texas way, okay? And put the, but you have to follow the Texas way, okay? We're gonna put, I had the YouTube going at the same time. And as you guys know, there's a little delay, so you'll probably hear my voice 2 times. Anyway, guys, you know what I just learned, which is kind of cool, is if you go to Blackboard, which you should already be there, right? And you go to, here, let me share my screen so you see what I'm doing. Share screen. Wait, share screen. Gingin, I don't know who this is. Hi, Matheus Pontific. Good work. I read your work. Very good. Now, if you're following along here, you know, you're on Blackboard, so you sign in like good boys and girls. And look at this, guys. If you go right here at the bottom, you see United States history. You see live tutorial. So you click on this, and what does it say? Let's make this bigger so everybody can read it. Posted on April 14, today, 11 a.m. Central Time. So be careful with the time. Central Time is, let's see, I think 2 hours before us, because Eastern Time is 1 hour, Central Time is 2 hours, but we will check on Google. I will be available during the following time below. Copy and paste the link into your browser. Google Chrome normally works best. And join the session during the time posted. This is a way for you to ask me any questions that you may have. Let me know if you have any questions about the live tutorial. So today and on Thursday at this time, the teacher from Texas will be online. So you just copy and paste. Of course, there's going to be nothing now because it's not the correct time. But, you know, you're going to get a little screen. It's going to be similar to how we're doing the classes via online. And then, see, look, there's nobody there. That's why I got this message. But if you go there, so this is the thing. You have to see what is Central Time. So Central Time in America, what time is it? It's the current time. Right now, it is, I don't know, let's see. I guess Central Time would be Texas. Canada, United States, Mexico. What's the current time? Central time zone in America? I think it's Texas. Yes, okay, it's all this here in the middle, this area. So let's say, what time is it in Texas right now? What time is it in Texas? What time is it in Texas? So right now in Texas, it's 12:55. So you see, they're very much behind us, right? They're behind us. Because here it's 2:54. So that's 2 hours behind us. So if I want to watch her live stream, which is at 5, then I need to go 2 hours ahead. So it's going to be 7 p.m. Okay, what time is it in Texas? What time is it in Sao Paulo? See, go like this. Time is it in Sao Paulo? It's 2:56, so that's 2 hours, right? So if I want it to be 5 o'clock in Texas, here in Brazil, it's going to be 7 p.m. It's half an hour. If you want to talk to this teacher from Texas, if you have any questions that you want to ask her, any doubts about the quizzes, the assignments, anything like this, you just go to Blackboard, like we just said. I'll go back so you see where it is. You see that? Live tutorial, live tutorial. So the other classes also have them. So the other classes also have live tutorials, but this is the one for US history. Okay, and then you click on it. Very simply. And then you copy and paste this link, but remember the times. It's not 5 o'clock Sao Paulo time. It's 5 o'clock Texas time, which is 7 p.m. or here you say 19 o'clock, right? 19 Sao Paulo time. Okay? So take advantage of that if you can. Who else is here? Let's see. Gingin. I don't know who Gingin is. Who is Gingin? Oh, my internet is slow. I'm going to close some windows so it's less slow. Now, what do I need you to do before we begin the class? As usual, I need you to sign in to Blackboard and have your ebook. I'll be using the ebook if you want to follow with me. That is not a problem. Guindaste. Oh, Gustavo. Oh, Gustavo, I sent you your work. I made a few corrections there, but good work. Anyway, you're on Blackboard. Excuse me. You go into United States history. Click this little arrow out. Units. What unit are we on? We are on unit 4. Becoming a world power and the progressive movement. We go down to the bottom. Let me hide this. Get our assignments. And remember, these are the questions that we need to answer for this unit. And these are the required notes. These are the ones that you have to do. And of course, like I say every week, if you are not taking your personal notes, then you need to do these over here. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those. On the required notes, we can look at it. And then, like I said, what's the easiest way to do it? you just copy and paste it. Okay. And I already did it. So it's right here. We answered this question last class. By the way, the last video that I put on YouTube was deleted because I showed the video from inside the ebook. Can you believe it? They hit me for copyright. So no more videos. And that video is not there anymore. If you have any questions about these first 4 questions, let me know. Because we definitely answered this. Why did the US have a war with Spain? Remember, it was about Cuba, right? How was the Spanish-American War different? I believe it had to do with how they fought it, what type of machines, or I guess you could call it transportation, very big transportation that they used, and also the areas where they were, so think about those things. And how did the open door policy prevent any nation from monopolizing trade with China? Because remember, Russia kind of wanted to just make China their own little toy. And America was afraid that, hey, we're going to lose the market. So now we're going to continue. And what are the major reasons that the United States wants to build a canal through Central America? Maybe you know the name of this canal. It's the Panama Canal. Oh, there you go, Gustavo. It's my other account. That's his gamer account. Guing is his gamer account. And this is his serious account. It's okay. I have my 2 different YouTube accounts too. Anyway. So guys, we finished right around here with the open door policy, in the Boxer Rebellion, where the Chinese troops attacked the embassies in Peking. But in the end, it was all forgiven. And that's basically where we stopped, because this lesson was a little long, so we didn't have time to finish it. So we're going to try to finish it today and go on to chapter 6. Reminder, as usual, do your quizzes. We are on chapter 5, guys. That's a lot of quizzes. In fact, guess what we are doing on Thursday? We're going to get together just like we did a couple weeks back and just try to work on some quizzes and assignments, and I can help you, and that's what's happening. So now we get Roosevelt and Taft's diplomacy. So look, I can't show you this video. How sad, okay? Well, President Roosevelt, he had this belief that a strong military presence, if the rest of the world knows that the US is a strong military, this could lead to peace. Okay? President McKinley was reelected, but he was assassinated in 1900. So Vice President Roosevelt became the president. And he was in favor of increasing the US power. And he also believed that it was America's duty, it was their job to shape the less civilized corners of the world, make the world more civilized. So Roosevelt supported open door policy. Pay attention to Roosevelt. He's a very important president. This is not the same Roosevelt from World War II. They were distant cousins, if I'm not mistaken. but not the same one. Okay, this is Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore. So he supported this, okay, and he did not want any nation to control trade over there. So he negotiated a resolution between a war with Japan and Russia, and Roosevelt convinced Russia to recognize Japan's territory, persuaded Japan to end the conflict and not get any more territories. And this was important because it showed that, hey, the world respected America, right? America's going around the world making diplomatic deals. And with this, it helped influence other countries wanting to accept the open door policy, okay? Which again, this is on chapter 5, lesson 3, where you're going to find information about the open door policy. But here we go, the Panama Canal. Roosevelt's big motto, a motto is a slogan. It's this: speak softly, but carry a big stick. Speak softly, but carry a big stick. And there's a famous cartoon of this to illustrate this. Now, I know you guys are thinking, what does that mean? Well, here is the big stick. Here is the American Navy, the Caribbean Sea. And basically, the idea is this: be very nice. Be nice with how you talk to people, treat them well, be diplomatic, but have a big stick. Be ready to hit somebody in the head if they need to be hit in the head. Okay? Yeah, Gabriel, I thought about this. I could try doing it without the sound, show the video without the sound, or maybe just a short clip of the video could work. Because sometimes this does help if I show it without the sound. Thank you, man. Gabriel, the YouTuber. So this is the idea of big stick policy. Do not forget this one because this one is important. Okay, big stick policy. Speak softly, but carry a big stick, which equals, oops, not going. Okay, well, that equals be diplomatic, but make sure people understand that you are powerful too. Like He-Man. He-Man was very diplomatic, but he could cut you in two. Or Superman, maybe. Okay. There you go. Internet's a little slow, but we will get through it. And so Roosevelt began to start. Should I try, guys? All right, I'm going to try. I'm going to take Gabriel's advice, but without sound. Without sound. But sometimes they get you for images too. Whoops, but I got to do the closed captioning so you know what's happening. So in 1869, one man shrank the globe. You know what? No, I'm not going to do it because I know I did this the other class. I turned the sound off because I wasn't sure if there was sound coming. So I don't know. I'm going to play it safe, Gabriel. But thanks for the advice, my man. Anyway, so US wanted to acquire and construct the Panama Canal. If you don't know where the Panama Canal is, it's right between Mexico and South America. It divides South America from Mexico. Before that used to be land, but then they cut it and they made a canal. A canal is like, I don't know, like a river, let's say, okay? But it's a man-made one. So they believed, Roosevelt, that if there was a canal through Central America, this would give the US a lot of power. It would also save time and money for commercial and military shipping because, to get to the Pacific Ocean, they wouldn't have to go all the way to South America, around Brazil, around Argentina to come all the way back up. They could cut right through the middle. So in 1902, Congress authorized the U.S. purchase of the French company's assets and construction of a canal. And Panama at the time belonged to Colombia. And the U.S. offered Colombia a lot of money and rent to build this canal. Okay. And Colombia refused. And this created tensions, okay? Because one, the Panamanians didn't want Colombians to rule over them. So the French said, hey, this could be a problem. This could be a problem because the US may decide not to go with the deal. So they met with the Panamanians, the French, and they decided to make a deal with the US. And in 1903, with US warships right close by, Panama revolted against Colombia. And within days, the US recognized Panama's independence, and the two nations signed a treaty to build the canal. Okay? So make sure you understand this. Panama belonged to Colombia. America wanted to build a canal there. Okay, that strip of land. Panama Canal. But, and here it is today. Look at that. Okay, it's not a very big strip, but it's an important strip. Okay. America wanted to build this, but Colombia said, no way, we don't want you to have this canal here, okay? Because this land here belonged to Colombia at the time. So what happens? America sends their their Navy. Panama revolts against Colombia. And why do you think Colombia didn't fight? Because of the US Navy, okay? So this was a way of speaking softly. Hey, let's try, there's Colombia right there. Let's try diplomacy. But if diplomacy doesn't work, I will blow your brains out. This is the American way, my friends. I see some of you dropped out. Not sure if it's an internet issue. It could very well be. But we will move on. So, like we said, ships had to go all the way to the south in order to get around America. But with the building of the Panama Canal, they could just cut. Instead of going all the way down, they could just go and be there. There was a lot of disease, of course, while building this canal. Malaria, yellow fever that you get from mosquitoes. But the canal was completed in 1914. This is a UNESCO heritage site. It's a great achievement for mankind. I mean, they cut through land and just created a space where there wasn't one before. And this is pretty incredible. So the Roosevelt corollary. But let's see if we answered one of the questions here. What's the first question? What were the major reasons the US wanted to build a canal through Central America? Well, we talked about it, okay? Think about travel distance, trade, all of these things, okay? We just read that, or we just talked about that, so you should be able to get that answer. It's going to be page 3 right there. So by the early 1900s, the Americans were worried about the large debts that Latin American nations owed European banks. Okay. In fact, a lot of these nations, Venezuela, in fact, defaulted on its debts. That means it did not pay its debts. So Britain, Germany, and Italy blockaded Venezuelan ports. The crisis resolved peacefully, okay, when Roosevelt called for an agreement. And he gave a speech in Congress, which became known as the Roosevelt Corollary. Okay, a corollary is an addition, and it's actually an addition to the Monroe Doctrine. It stated that the United States would intervene in Latin American affairs when necessary to maintain economic, political stability in the Western Hemisphere. If you don't know what the Monroe Doctrine is, it basically said, President Monroe said, listen, America is going to stay out of Europe and Europe's problems, but Europe needs to stay out of America and America's problems. This was a doctrine that kind of showed that America is now an independent country. Okay? We have our own destiny. Don't mess with it. You have your own destiny. We will not mess with it. And we can all be friends. And what was the goal of this corollary? It was to one second, guys, sorry. All right, sorry about that. The purpose of it was basically to tell Europe to stay out of our business. This is the Western Hemisphere, and America is the big boy over here, so you guys need to stay away. That was basically the reason. And because America wanted to also control this area, okay? This is another reason for it. So we answered one question. Okay, so let's move on to the next. What were the major reasons America wanted to build a canal? We answered that. How did moral diplomacy shape Wilson's foreign policy? Okay, so President Wilson is very much ahead of us. So let's not worry about that now. Oh, everybody's back. I see 8 people here. Hello. Dollar diplomacy. Another type of diplomacy that was used was this thing called dollar diplomacy. And basically what it said is that if America supported Latin America's industry, it would increase trade and profits. So that's why there's a lot of American investments. You see American investments here in Brazil all the time, right? In fact, the last presidential election, that was one of the main points. We want to have more connection economically with America. So this has been going on forever. And this was a type of diplomacy started by William Howard Taft, which was Roosevelt's successor. And again, this would give Europeans even less of a reason to go to Latin America because all of the loans and the money and the commerce would be going through America and not Europe. And to be honest, guys, it's something that you still feel the influence of today. Obviously, it's a much more global world, so we do have European companies that are here a lot, but America really invested a lot in South America. How did moral diplomacy shape President Wilson's foreign policy? Oh, what do you know? That's the next question. So we have Roosevelt, we have Taft, and now we have President Wilson, who is technically the first progressive president. And what is progressivism? It's this idea that society can be better working for the poor, for women, for social rights, work rights. These are the progressives, okay? We kind of got a little bit of it with the populists, but the progressives become a much more powerful movement. So Woodrow Wilson, how did he deal with foreign policy? Well, first off, he was more interested in domestic policy, okay? He didn't really want to worry about the rest of the world, but because Roosevelt kind of opened that door, you really couldn't close it anymore. So a lot of his time and energy as president was taken up by foreign affairs. World War I, for example. Okay? Wilson was against imperialism. He believed in democracy. And he wanted the US to promote democracy around the world. And he thought that this was best utilized through something called moral diplomacy. And he would have this moral example of what a good nation should be. But things didn't turn out as planned. First, we have a Mexican Revolution, okay? Mexico was much more industrialized, and a lot of foreign investors owned the new railroads and factories that were being built, and Mexican citizens remained poor. Mexicans didn't like this. So there was a revolution. Francisco Madero, he seemed to support a democracy and constitutional government, but he was not a very good administrator, and people plotted against him. And in 1913, General Victoriano seized power and Madero was murdered. Huerta repulsed Wilson, okay, who did not recognize the new government. So Wilson announced a new policy. To win U.S. recognition, groups that seized power in Latin America would have to establish a government based on law, not on force. The U.S. believed that without U.S. support, Huerta would soon be overthrown. So again, let's do the short version of this. And this is important because to this day it still happens. I don't know if you guys follow the news, where America did not recognize the new president in Venezuela. They said this is not a legitimate president. So Wilson's moral diplomacy said exactly this. America is only going to support countries who have some form of law, no dictatorships, and they have to form their government based on laws. So Wilson does send troops to Mexico, and basically because some American sailors were trapped there, the Mexicans refused to let them go. So Wilson said, this is my opportunity to get rid of Huerta. So Congress authorized the use of force. Wilson learned that German ships were unloading weapons in the Mexican port. So Wilson sent American warships to Veracruz, where US Marines seized the city. And Wilson thought, hey, Mexicans are going to welcome us. We're liberating them from this dictatorship. But this was not the case. Okay? There was a lot of anti-American riots. And Wilson had to accept some international help in order to mediate the crisis. And eventually, this guy, Venustiano Carranza, became Mexico's president. The Mexicans forces opposed to Carranza raided the United States, hoping to force Wilson to intervene. And in 1916, Pancho Villa, in a group of guerrillas, burned the town of Columbus, New Mexico, killing 17 Americans. And Wilson responded by sending 5,800 troops across the border to capture Villa. The expedition ended without success. And this Mexican policy really damaged US foreign relations. Why? Because the British said, man, you can't just go into a place and shoot people and tell them, hey, now you should build your own government. Latin Americans, they thought this was moral imperialism, and no different than Roosevelt's big stick diplomacy. Basically, they said, man, you're coming into our country thinking that you know better than we do how to run our country. What makes you the moral God? Okay, what makes you God to do this? So, in the end, it wasn't exactly the best policy, okay? Because these international crises were forcing Wilson to take action, but the countries where these things were happening said, hey, this is our country, these are our problems, we don't want to have anything to do with you. If anybody has any questions so far, you can ask me. But I think we're all together. And if you go in your ebook, there's the man, Pancho. So to answer this question here, how did moral diplomacy shape Wilson's foreign policy? Well, remember, he had this view of the world where he said, hey, it's our duty as Americans to help, but we don't want to help militarily. Like, we don't want to be in an armed conflict. We want to get away from Roosevelt's big military presence. But the problem is, in the end, he kind of did the same thing. So, how it shaped his foreign policy is that he ended up doing basically the same thing that Roosevelt did, except that he didn't want to do the same thing that Roosevelt did, but in the end, he actually did. Okay. But he believed in his heart that, hey, if we have moral diplomacy without the use of force, we can create a better world for everyone. So that's the end of chapter 5, guys. That's the end of chapter 5. Now, before we move ahead, let's see. Hi, Victor. Look, lesson 2, graphic organizer, lesson 3, graphic organizer. So you guys need to do these two for your required notes. So what is this? Let's see. Let us see. Why is it not opening? Or did it open and I didn't see it? Oh, there it is. Welcome to slow internet, guys. Oh, it logged me off. That's fun. All right, lesson 2, reading strategies. So you have to do this one. And what does it say? We shall see in a second. Factors contributing to declaration. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, guys. Factors contributing to declaration of war. You read about the Spanish-American War. What are 3 things that contributed, that happened to make America say, we are going to war? 3 things. And that's in lesson 2, obviously, because that's where the reading strategies is. And there's, the question right there. In lesson 3, what is this graphic organizer? Three reasons why America wanted to build the canal. 3 reasons why America wanted to build the canal. All right. I see some people were not able to connect and some people can't talk. I'm going to send a message on WhatsApp. If you have any questions, you can ask here. All right, moving on to chapter 6, the progressive movement. Today we assume that our food and medication are safe, but in the 1800s that was not the case. Through the efforts of the progressives who wanted to improve life for all Americans, changes were made that not only made food and medicine safe, but also gave women the right to vote, improved working conditions, and conserved the nation's natural places. Okay, so this is the progressive era. It really shaped the United States. There's Theodore Roosevelt again. He was a big conservationist. A lot of state forests and things like that, or there's all the national parks of the Western United States. They were made by him. And of course, Wilson was a big progressive, and we'll get to that in this chapter. So why does it matter, the progressive era? Well, like we said, a lot of changes from food safety, work safety, women being able to vote. These changes progressed, move ahead, move forward. This is why it's called the progressive era. And today we still have progressives, okay, that they want to continue to move society forward in some way. So who are they? It's a collection of different ideas and activities. Okay, it's not an organized political movement. So it's more like a response to an American problem, especially after the Industrial Revolution. And progressives had a lot of different ways to fix these problems that they saw in America. Some of progressivism had to do with being against laissez-faire. Laissez-faire, remember, is free enterprise, free market, because the free market was against regulating the market. Okay, progressives believe that no, we need regulations because regulations protect people. And they also believed that industrialization and urbanization created many social problems. So they came to the conclusion that the free market can't solve all these problems because look how much violence there is in urban centers where there's a lot of work, there's money, but there's still crime, there's still violence. So something else needs to happen. Progressives belong to both major parties. A lot of them were urban, educated, middle class. They were journalists, social workers, educators, politicians, church members. And most of them agreed that, hey, the government needs to play a bigger part in solving society's problem. And they believed that the way that the government was at the time could not do this. The government needed to be fixed before it could be used to fix problems. If you recall from a few classes ago, maybe 2 or 3 classes ago, there was the Gilded Age, a lot of corruption in America. So the progressives were like, okay, we need the government to help us, but the government's corrupt. So we need the government to be not corrupt first, and then we can think about using it to fix the society's problems. Progressives mainly believed in science and technology. Okay. Their application of science created the light bulb, telephone, automobile, skyscrapers. So these were people that believed that, hey, science is on our side. And we can use science to improve society. So who are the first people to articulate progressive ideas? These were people called the muckrakers. Theodore Roosevelt gave them this name because he thought, hey, these guys are always trying to create a scandal. They're obsessed with corruption. They're always writing bad news on the newspaper. And these muckrakers, they discovered corruption in many, many, many different places, such as Ida Tarbell and Charles Edwin Russell. They exposed unfair practices in large corporations. Others found government problems. Others focused on social problems. So basically, who made up the progressives? a lot of different types of people, but mostly um, people that had some education, science-based, middle class, who could be loud and people could listen to them and get these ideas across. What was the primary goal of the muckrakers? Well, we just talked about it, so I'm going to put XXX. If you are paying attention and not watching YouTube videos, then you know the answer to that, because we just talked about the muckrakers. If you did not listen, it's on page 2 of lesson 1 of chapter 6. Let's see what the next question is. How did the progressives support women's suffrage? Women's suffrage, by the way, is the right of women to vote. But we'll get there. Progressives were all about reform. Reform is changing the way something was, and they were against corruption. So that's repeating the same thing. And how do we make government efficient? Well, there are a lot of books about it. One was the Principles of the Scientific Management. It describes how companies could increase efficiency by managing time, breaking tasks into smaller bits. It's a scientific approach. And progressives saw corruption and inefficiency in city government. And definitely remember the Gilded Age, Tammany Hall. This is all big corruption in the city level. So they wanted reforms, new laws. This is happening all the time down here in Brazil. Remember a few years back, they passed the law where you had to have a clean record. You know, you couldn't have any processes against you. If you did, you could not run for a political office. And that's a progressive idea, guys. That's what I'm saying is that to be progressive doesn't mean you are left wing or right wing. Progressive can be both. You know, you can say that I don't know, maybe a political party. Bernie Sanders, he just left the presidential race. He's progressive. He's into universal health care. He wants a $15 minimum wage for everybody. This is more of a left-wing guy. He's left, okay? But he's a progressive. But at the same time, if you look at some of the guys down here in Brazil who are fighting against Dilma and who wanted to clean corruption and they wanted to they fought for the Lava Jato. These are progressive ideas too, and these people can be considered more right-wing, okay? So progressive, today, it's mostly connected to the left-wing parties, but the truth is that you can be right-wing or left-wing or center and still be progressive, okay? If you're fighting for people's rights and reform and less corruption in governments, okay? Progressives also fought for democratic reforms, okay? They wanted the government to be more democratic, respond to the citizens. In Wisconsin, that's where they started some of these ideas. This guy, Robert M. La Follette, he attacked the way political parties ran their conventions. Why? Because party bosses controlled the selection of delegates and nomination. So whoever was the leader of the party, he's the one that said, this guy is going to run and that guy is going to run, but not really the people, okay? So La Follette, he pressured the state legislature to pass a law saying we want direct primaries, meaning people are going to vote for who the candidate is for the general election. And guess what? We still do this today in America. Anybody can run for an office. It's not somebody that is put there by the party leaders. No, you have, just like we just saw, for the Democratic Party, you had, I think in the beginning, maybe 14 or 16 people just for the Democratic Party running. And in the end, Joe Biden won more votes from the people. So he is the nominee, not the other way around. The Democratic Party didn't say, I think we want Joe Biden to become the Democratic nominee. No, it doesn't work that way. Although there is still corruption, and a lot of people believe that the media and the Democratic Party does help in other ways. Maybe they give more support, vocal support to one candidate than the other, which is why Joe Biden became the nominee. But technically, it was a direct vote. In every state, people voted, and Joe Biden is going to be the presumptive Democratic nominee for president. He will run against Donald J. Trump. The direct primary soon spread to other states. And other reforms that they wanted. The initiative permits citizens to introduce legislation and requires the legislature to vote on it. That's a reform. So if you feel that something is wrong in your neighborhood or in your city, you have the right to write a law, go there and have the legislature vote on it. And of course, you have to gather enough signatures in order for this to happen. So you can't just say, I want a Burger King outside my house to give me burgers every day. For me, tacos. I want a Taco Bell to deliver to my house for free. Well, come on. I have to have enough people, maybe 1,000, sometimes more, 5,000 signatures of people that agree that, listen, I believe that after 10 p.m., people shouldn't make so much noise. So I have 5,000 people that agree with me from my neighborhood in Tatuapé. What are you going to do about it? And guess what the legislature has to think about? We can ignore you, or we can listen to you because you're voting for us. And if we ignore you, maybe you won't vote for us in the next election. There's also indirect initiatives. The proposed law goes to the legislature first. If the legislature refuses to act on it, it goes to the ballot for public to vote on. Okay? That's another way that you can have this initiative. A referendum. This allows people to vote for proposed laws directly. Okay? This happens a lot in smaller communities, but here in Brazil, there was a referendum for guns back in 2006, I believe. Before this, Brazilians could have guns, but then a vote was put to the people. Do you want guns or no? Do you know what the result of the vote was? Most people said, yes, we want guns, but the government said, I don't care, and they took the guns away. Anyway, another example is in Ireland. About 2 years ago, they put the vote. Do you think that gay people should get married or be allowed to marry? And the majority of the people said yes. And so now gay people can marry in Ireland. Okay? So this is a referendum. That's the name for this. I hope you're writing some of these vocabulary words down. This will be good for your notes. Hi, Victor. And finally, we have the recall. What is a recall? That's when you can demand a special election to remove somebody from office. Okay? There's 19 states that allow for this to happen. Recalls are frequent for local officials, not so much for higher ups, like governors and mayors and senators and stuff like that. But hey, we can have many recalls, many recalls. If I feel that you are not doing your job, you can get kicked out. Only 2 governors have ever been recalled. I believe in California was one because the governor there was terrible. California was just going through a really bad time. So there was a recall election where they voted him out of office. And then it was an open election. This was very crazy, where anybody could put their name on the ballot, like anybody. There was even Mickey Mouse maybe put his name on the ballot, actors. And one very famous actor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, put his name on the ballot to become the governor of California. And guess what? He became the governor of California. That's how he became the governor of California. Progressives also targeted the U.S. Senate. The U.S. Constitution said there should be 2 senators. But political machines and business interests often influence these elections. So a lot of senators, once elected, or some senators, repaid their supporters with federal contracts and jobs. So to counter this, reformers also said we should have direct elections of senators by votes. And they passed a law saying direct election. Because again, guys, whenever you put somebody in office, like imagine I give Mayada a job, like in my classroom. And you guys didn't vote for Mayada, but Mayada is now working for me. Well, guess what? Mayada's gonna help me whenever I need any help because I gave her a good job, right? So that's how things usually work. So in politics, it's no different. So if I'm giving you a job as a senator, of course, you're going to help me after because I can fire you too. I can help you get unelected. So now we get to women's suffrage. Women's suffrage, guys. Suffrage means, it's a strange word that just means voting rights. Okay? This is what suffrage. It doesn't have to do with suffer. When I was little, like your age, I thought that it had to do with suffering, women's suffering, but it's not. It's suffrage is women's rights, which I believe is the next question. How did the progressives support the women's suffrage movement? How did they support it and why? Okay. Well, there was the Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, very famous place. And this lady, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, she convinced the delegates that winning the right to vote, there she is, was extremely important. It was a priority. But this was back in 1848, long time ago. Compared to where we are now in history, 1900s, right? Almost 50 years. But guess what? 1917, 1912, around this time, sorry, not 1917, around this time, there was still no right to vote. So how did this movement begin? It was not a popular movement in the beginning. Suffragists were threatened. They were called unfeminine. immoral. And also, a lot of the movement supporters also wanted to end slavery. And ending slavery became more important than giving women the right to vote. So a lot of the focus was on that, which in fact, after the Civil War, there was the 14th and 15th Amendments that granted citizenship to African Americans and voting rights to African American men, blacks. Okay? But women said, hey, we want these rights too. So the debates over these two amendments split the movement into two groups: the New York-based one, founded by Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, and the Boston-based movement by Lucy Stone and Julia Ward Howe. The first group wanted to focus on passing a constitutional amendment, like happened with the blacks. We need a constitutional amendment that says women have the right to vote. But the second group said, no, we should just get the state government to give us the right to vote first. Okay? Remember, state versus federal. One group thought, hey, we should do this state by state, similar to what's happening now with marijuana. I think I read yesterday that, oh my God, is it Alabama? I forgot now, but it's a state that's very conservative in America. They have recently legalized marijuana, but it's happening state by state by state by state in America. There isn't a federal law. So if you go to a state where it's illegal, you are in big trouble, like maybe Texas. I don't know how Texas is. You don't want to get in trouble in Texas for anything. Trust me. So some states had granted women's rights, by the way, the right to vote. But again, it's state by state by state. And Susan B. Anthony said, no way, man. We need something that is very, very national. And there you go. These are the states that were offering women the right to vote before, spoilers, it becomes an amendment. Okay? But before that, it was on a state by state by state by state. And like I said, look, these states here, I think it was Alabama that did this. They're very conservative states. So usually they're a little bit behind on a lot of these movements. But hey, look at that. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, where I'm from, was also not moving ahead on the progressive train. So how did he build support? Well, they formed the National American Women's Suffrage Association. NAWSA, not NASA, but NAWSA. The movement still faced the challenge of convincing women to become politically active, okay? Because basically, you know, women, there were a lot of women that were fine being housewives, and there's no problem being a housewife, okay? But I guess they couldn't see the bigger picture of like, maybe other women don't want to be housewives. So they didn't want to become politically active. And also, they needed to realize that in order for women to get more working rights, they need to have voting rights. So women began to organize speeches, giving out pamphlets, and lobbying state and federal legislators directly. So to lobby means you contact your political leader personally. And you explain to him what is the problem. You just go there and just tell him, this is the problem. And often lobbyists promise to support the legislator financially when they run for re-election in return for their support. So in order to support the legislature, lobbyists also needed to raise money. Okay, so that when the election came, they would support the politician that supported them. Here they're talking about the Quaker social worker and former NALSA member Alice Paul founded the National Women's Party, which emphasized non-violent protests to promote women's rights. There was picketing, blocked sideways, women chained themselves to lampposts, they went on hunger strikes. Oh, I need to see some of this. Let's see. NWP protests. Let's see. There it is. There's some picketing. I want to see the women chained to the lamppost. Oh, there she is. Or maybe not. They blocked streets. They gave speeches. This is a very important, very, very, very important moment for white women, okay? Later, Black women get some of these same rights, but for white women, definitely an important movement. But of course, you have to start somewhere, right, guys? You gotta start somewhere. So, and a lot of these women were arrested, went to prison. It was a hard fight. And here on page 7, you can read a letter from Rose Wilson when she went to jail. Hunger strikes, that's when you don't eat in order to make a point. And it got a lot of attention in the press. The muckrakers, remember the muckrakers? And also police attacks on women. That was not a good thing for the police. The U.S. had just entered World War I. And President Wilson was trying to show that the U.S. was fighting for freedom and democracy. So, because of this, it made Wilson talk publicly to Congress to pass an amendment giving women the right to vote. Wilson may have been influenced by the public support that NALSA had given him. So basically, hey, we're fighting a war to try to promote democracy, but we don't have democracy in our country. And a lot of people support these women. So why not? And while the NWP focused on nonviolent protests, the leader of NALSA organized the suffrage movement for one final nationwide push for suffrage. She got all the money to support politicians who backed suffrage. She convinced the organization to support Wilson for re-election, and then supported the president when he took the country into war in 1917. So she used her money to support Wilson because they thought, hey, maybe with Wilson we can finally get the right to vote. And as more states started to give women the right to vote, Congress said, hey, maybe we should just make a constitutional amendment and make this the law of the land. But when they tried this in 1918, the amendment failed by 2 votes because you need, two-fourths of the states to say yes in order for a constitutional amendment to pass. But they continued. In 1919, the Senate passed the amendment by slightly more than 2/3 needed, and then 2/4 of the state ratified it in the 19th Amendment. Remember that, girls. The 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. So how did the progressives support women's suffrage movement? Well, think about the lobbying that women did, the women's rights lobbyists. So how did the progressives support this? After the women lobbied them, what did the progressives do? Did they write laws? Did they write in the newspapers? Remember, progressives are not just the politicians. So there's a lot of information there. If you have to rewatch this video, hopefully it will not be taken from YouTube. Watch this section or read it in your book. But there was a lot that the progressives did to support women's right to vote, from media to legislature, etc. Moving on. Reforming society. And by the way, we're not going to finish this chapter today, so we may have to continue next week. What problems did social welfare progressives attempt to reform? Okay, so what problems in society did progressives try to change? Well, there was crime, illiteracy, that's when you can't read, alcohol abuse, this is going to be a problem, child labor, little children working. Look at this picture of little kids working in the factories. Health and safety. Okay, so there were progressives that created charities. They also pushed new laws that would fix social problems. And women were the prominent leaders. They were the main leaders of these social welfare progressives. And most women in the progressive movement came from middle or upper class families. And they felt a responsibility towards working class women. And working class women mainly dealt with poverty, safety, abuse. And a lot of times when the men left the women, or maybe they died because of the war, women were left poor, vulnerable, okay? So progressives thought, hey, we need to find a better way to protect women, especially in factory work. Because at the time, there were children as young as 9 or 10 who would work in these small factories. And it's very dangerous, guys. It's very dangerous to work in a factory. So it's not something that we wanted to do. So they thought about health and safety codes, okay? Like we just said, dangerous places to work. So there were 2 cases that went to the Supreme Court that, and the court ruled that a New York law forbidding bakers to work more than 10 hours a day was unconstitutional, saying that the state did not have the right to interfere with the liberty of employer and employees. In the Mueller case, which involved women working in laundries, the court upheld the state's right to limit hours. So you see that there's 2 very, very different views on working hours. One said, hey, whoever owns the store has the right to say how many hours somebody works. The other place said, no, the state has the right to limit the hours that somebody works. The different judgments were based on gender, okay? The court said that healthy mothers were the state's concern, and therefore limit on women's working hours did not violate the 14th Amendment. But in the Lochner case, the court adhered to a strict construction of the Constitution and decided that government did not have the power to interfere in the rights, okay? In the Miller case, the court had been more of an activist. It interpreted the Constitution in a way that would help the public need, okay? But it treated women differently than men. But in March 25th, there was a great tragedy in New York City. A fire on one of the top floors of the Triangle Shirtwaist Company caused nearly 150 of the factory's 500 workers to lose their lives. And again, this showed that, man, we have no fire prevention. We have nothing. So progressives said, we need zoning laws. We need to protect the public. So we need laws that say this area is for commercial, this area is for residential, or some other developments. Buildings had to have a minimum standard of light, air, room size. So again, guys, this is why this is such an important era, not just in American history, but in world history, because other countries followed this example. It's what you see today. I mean, if you're in Sao Paulo, if you go to Paulista, you see that's the commercial area. There's a few residential buildings, but it's mostly commercial. I can't, technically, let's say, I can't just say, I want to build a house next to Shopping Center Tres. I can't do this, right? Because that's a commercial area. In the same way, Shopping Center Tres, or 3, can't come here where I live in Butantã and say, oh, I want to build a shopping mall right next to your house. There's zoning laws for this, okay? I mean, here in Brazil, sometimes it gets a little crazy. I don't know, maybe some money is exchanged and some things are built maybe where they shouldn't be. But technically, you're not supposed to, okay? Why? Because if I have a huge factory and there's a fire and there's 5 houses next to it, this can affect the houses, okay? And zoning laws created a constitutional question. The Fifth Amendment says that no one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So if the government is taking something of value, it's supposed to pay for it. So as the government began to impose zoning laws on communities to improve sanitation and quality of life, individuals and businesses were complaining that they were losing the use of their property and they wanted to be compensated. And there was a case here of the brick maker arguing that he needed clay on his land to make the bricks, and that zoning laws forced him to move his kiln, and it was against the Constitution. But the court disagreed, and it said that the zoning law was constitutional because the government had the right to police and protect public health. And in 1922, the court had an even straighter interpretation. A coal company owned the rights to mine on their piece of land, but a law prohibited mining below land that supported buildings on the surface. So the court agreed that the law had gone too far. Under its Fifth Amendment right, the coal company had been deprived of its property and was owed compensation. The case established that the government does not have an unlimited right to regulate property use. At some point, government regulation of property, even when done in the public interest, does require compensation. And we have this happen all the time, even if people want to build dams, people want to build roads, they need to compensate people for that area that they're going to use. And sometimes people can revolt and say no. Like I think in Higienópolis, they were going to build the metro and the people said no. Anyway, guys, that's the end of the class. It's 4:15. We stopped right here in the Prohibition movement, which is an interesting part of US history. We answered all the way to question Well, we didn't answer 9. Oh, no, yes, we did. What problems did social welfare programs? We talked about a whole lot of these problems. Okay, so I hope you're paying attention. Um, and then we'll get to 10, 11, 12, 13 in the next class. Okay. And thank you guys for being here as always. You guys are awesome. I know it can be a little boring just listening to me talk. But let me say hello to you. Where am I? Hello. It can be boring listening to me just talk. But history is a lot of talking, and because of how much work we have to do and the way we're doing it, not so much time for discussion. But you can email me, as some of you have been emailing me. It's not a problem. You can WhatsApp me. Again, some of you have been sending me messages on WhatsApp. Not a problem. Or that's it. I mean, I guess if you want to talk to me on Skype, we can talk on Skype. So you have a lot of different ways that you can contact me and ask me any questions. If you have any doubts, hopefully this video will stay online and you can find where all the answers are to the assignment questions, and do the quizzes. On Thursday, we will talk more about quizzes. Thank you guys. Have a good afternoon. This video will stay up on YouTube. Bye-bye.